Apple developers and the war in Ukraine, and podcast picks. This is MacVoices. This edition of MacVoices is supported by the MacVoices Dispatch, our weekly newsletter to keep you up on all the latest from MacVoices. Watch or listen to MacVoices straight from your email client. Sign up at macvoices.com/newsletter and stay up to date. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, this time the MacVoices panel's attention turns to our Apple developers and friends in the Ukraine who are engaging in some truly heroic efforts in defense of their country. We also then, on a bit of a lighter note, take a look at some of our favorite non-tech podcasts. Let's go back and let the panel do the talking.
All I'm thinking of right now is John Keat and somebody describing his 6 monitor under desk display. And someone said, why does he have 6 monitors? And the answer was because 2 of them are broken.
Right now, John's setup, and I'm not kidding you. I think it's the big display he has it's at least 85 inches.
The big display?
The big display. And below that, side by side, just lined up across the bottom, it's 3 32-inch displays.
Wow.
And he uses all of that space. And I just...
his desk?
Doesn't he?
That's
didn't
insane.
He say he has like 7.2 acres of resolution or something?
It's something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he has more resolution than he has land.
Yes.
Yes.
Probably.
Yeah. I've seen that I've seen the
web
big display. It's bigger than my first car.
So a pixel per monitor, then, basically.
There's a Weird Al song. There's a Weird Al song like this.
Yeah, apparently my
TV.
My neighbor's getting a studio display.
Nice.
Yeah, I was going to say, Web in the chat room says he has one on.
He's got one on order.
And Paul
Web, I'm
also
looking
said
forward to
Jeff is
hearing
right.
how you like it.
So that's 2. We got 2.
Yeah, and I'm not sure.
Well, and I know Brian Chaffin has ordered 2.
Of course he has.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Paul says Jeff is right in the chat room. I'm not sure which Jeff and what he's right about, but congratulations to somebody.
But both of us, and of course we
all
are.
the time. Yeah.
The answer is yes.
Yeah.
You have to say either butts or underpants for us to know who you're talking about. Come on, chat room, get it together.
We need to have that. We need to have that as an auto message in the chat room. If you're going to refer to one of the 2 Jeffs, it's either butts or underpants.
Or UP. You can shorten it.
Yeah.
UP is fine.
UP. I want to move us on to the next topic because we're beating this to death.
Are we?
But I'm just throwing links. I'm just throwing links in the chat rooms about the software that MacPaw just released. Referring to it as a SpyBuster tool. And first off, we said it a little bit earlier. We referenced it. We are all thinking about our friends in the Ukraine and what they're going through. And I thought this was really interesting that a software developer decides, hey, we can do something more than what we've been doing, and they release something that is fighting against Russian propaganda and potentially Russian spyware. So good for you guys. And I'm anxious to see what everybody else thought about this, because I just thought it just seems so like MacPaw to be doing exactly this kind of thing.
The thing I don't think it's getting lost in the iMore reporting, but I think a thing that should get more attention than it is that MacPaw is in fact Ukrainian. They're in Kyiv. Like, some of them are there listening to all of this go down, watching it happen. They're in the midst right now. And the first thing they did was post something on their website that was like, here are all the places that you can find legitimate information about what's happening here, and here's how you can donate. Yep. And then turned around and said, they have a VPN service that they offer. And they said, anyone who's reporting on anything here, we're here to help you. You get a year for free, basically, no questions asked. And it's just, I am in awe of them as an organization to be in the center of the threat that the rest of the world is watching and still try and find a way to help other people, which is exactly what they're doing here. And it's just another one of those like moments of like, you know, like I know them, we've hung out.
Right.
You know, like I'm really glad to know that I have been associated with people who are fundamentally, you know, good people and trying to do anything that they can that would be helpful. And I would like to think that I would have the same sort of capacity if I were in a similar situation.
And that was one thing that we tried to make sure of over at TMO was that, you know, when we covered the SpyBuster, you know, we referenced the other things that MacPaw is doing. And, you know, and it's a lot of the other development firms over there too. Readdle has been heavily involved. Unclutter is on top of things constantly. Nicotiny, I might be getting the name wrong. That's another one. They've reached out to me on Twitter recently and pointed out that, you know, they're in the thick of it too. And, you know, letting us know what they're doing, how they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff, you mentioned that Readdle is doing stuff over there as well. And and that reminded me, in the last couple days, they let everyone know that they've actually been helping people get out of Ukraine and into Poland.
Yeah.
And I don't know the number. I want to say it's like 1,000 people so far.
I'd have to go back and look.
I'd have to go back and check too. But
yeah,
the stuff these people are doing is epic. And as far as I'm concerned, they're all heroes.
It's absolutely heroic. They're not just sitting at their computers coding.
Mm-hmm.
They're out trying to help their fellow citizens get through this.
And a case could be made that, you know, they might have things that could be higher on their priority list, like taking care of themselves and their families. And so having the wherewithal, not to mention the bandwidth to even pretend like they can update a website or anything like that. Having these things happen and having them built and all that, like, just really, I'm very, very impressed and very pleased, you know, like I said before, to have ever had a chance to get to hang out with them and get to know them, because I'm just in awe. And I really hope everybody goes and checks it out. Go see what they're up to. Unclutter is offering gift licenses. I think last time we talked about it, I said, you know, you could just go buy somebody an Unclutter license if you know, to help them out. And they now have a name your own price, and all the money basically goes to aid organizations in Ukraine. So they're a good one. And MacPaw over there with SetApp and everything else, and and Readdle, and, you know, any of us that have ever been to an Apple conference have at some point had some sort of interaction with Dennis from Readdle, and he's just delightful, and all those folks are really great, and my heart goes out to them. And I've bought a bunch of licenses and set up a bunch of other things just to do what I can from here and try to spread the word. So if you're somebody who needs to upgrade something, like, let me direct you to some people that I know who make amazing stuff, who also happen to be amazing people.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. And you know, unfortunately, the one danger in discussing this is we end up leaving out people because they, you know, other people are doing other things that they may not be quite as visible, but just the very fact that they're enduring this. I'm thinking about BeLight Software. I don't think Grammerly has been mentioned yet.
No, they haven't.
There's so many
is
folks.
Grammerly the company that is paying their employees' salaries, even if they leave to go help fight for Ukraine?
I think you might be right.
I think that was them.
I'm pretty sure it's Grammarly. It's you want to go and defend our country, whatever, your salary is still being paid.
You're good.
Full.
Yeah.
And I mean, just the people over there in general. You know, we heard last week about the telecom guys trying to keep the cell systems up and running. You know, they're going into places where the signal's going down, even while the shells are still dropping. While the buildings are threatening to fall apart around them, they're going in and patching back in, getting the mobile service restored, getting the internet restored, so that the Ukrainians don't lose contact with the outside world. So many people in Ukraine, I think, are just absolute heroes through all of this.
And naturally, because we're here, we're talking about it just from the tech aspect, but there are people that are doing things, in every other part of life in the Ukraine, from the water to power to everything else, that just, I don't know, it seems like you see it in movies, you see it in TV, you see it in war films, and it was somebody else. It was a long time ago, and this is real. This is now, and these are people that a lot of us know, and it just it makes you react at a much more emotional level, I think, in a whole different way. I would like to think that any of us would acquit ourselves half as well as these folks are doing. I would be proud to be doing that, and they're going way above and beyond. So, if this reaches them, I'm at a loss just to, as to how much I admire and respect you guys. It's amazing.
Yep,
it's amazing.
So go get a SetApp subscription.
Oh, for sure.
Because not only are you supporting Ukrainian developers, but you're supporting the Ukraine when you do that.
Yeah.
Not
it's
the
also
Ukraine.
Really good
you're supporting Ukraine when you do that.
And it's also worth it. I mean,
did you say Ukraine?
I'm having a horrible time with words tonight. I totally threw myself when I used the propaganda name on accident.
That's the name Russia really hopes Ukraine's going to turn into.
Yeah, I think the squirrels might have chewed some of the wires going to his central processing unit.
It's very possible.
Anyhow, SetApp. I've had it since they almost started, and I love it.
You
probably do a whole show about it.
Oh yeah,
I could easily. Yeah. I mean,
I did a review on it when they first came out, and really even back then when they first came, I'm like, this is really a good most of these services I tried before. I'm surprised they're still able to do it. It's just amazing that nobody really came up with anything like this before that.
Well, I mean, there has been subscription-based services like this before, but this is certainly. This is certainly better than the ones that have come before it.
I can't remember
I can't remember anything like that.
That's almost like a Netflix kind of thing, and that I don't remember anything like that for even now.
Who remembers?
They all had Everweb and RapidWeaver on them.
Yeah.
No, they were bundles, but they weren't subscriptions like SetApp.
Right.
Again, this is like
the closest was Humble Bundle, which is a subscription, and now is Windows only.
Yeah.
When was that a subscription?
You can subscribe to Humble Bundle, and then you get the subscription packages that come out.
But you
get your perpetual license.
Was that for their games or something?
But you didn't have to subscribe. You could buy. I've seen the ads. It's like buy our Humble Bundle now, and you can still do it.
It's like getting a discount price.
You get 4 good apps and 20 apps.
Right, but you were buying them. They weren't.
No,
SetApp. I've never seen anything like that, and I'm pretty confident because from the developer side, developers have to modify their app for SetApp. Mm-hmm. The versions that come with SetApp are modified versions. They're not the same as like if you buy the app directly from the developer or from the App Store, because they've got this extra code. So if you stop subscribing, those apps will stop working.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes it is like Netflix, and sometimes these apps don't. They come and go. I don't know if you noticed that. I've known a couple drop off. Like I think iMazing was there initially in the early years, and then for some reason it ended, and then they replaced it with there's an Android file AnyTransfer, and I think there's an iOS AnyTransfer. It's kind of similar, but whatever it was. But
I think they require a 2-year commitment when they add somebody.
Yeah, I mean, but that's the only time I could think that was, that I wouldn't say I wouldn't suggest it, but just be aware that there was one app for sure that I know that was there at one point, wasn't there going forward. But it's monthly. You could stop anytime.
Jeff, yeah. Early on, Jeff and I had a discussion with the MacPaw president about SetApp, just as it was great. My internet connection is unstable. Just when I want to say something, about SetApp and how it was going to work and why it would work for developers as well as users. I'll try to put a link in the show notes to that because it was a great discussion. And I admit, I think we approached it, and we told him we were going to approach it with a certain amount of skepticism. And I think Brett Terpstra was also part of that discussion because he had one of his apps on SetApp.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we had Jeff and I looking at it, Brett there kind of supporting it. And it ended up like all the questions got answered. And it just seemed to be a brilliant way to do it.
And I've been a SetApp user ever since.
Today's edition of MacVoices is brought to you by the MacVoices Dispatch, our weekly newsletter. Visit macvoices.com/newsletter today, sign up, and stay up to date.
And I'm surprised, like,
Me too.
Apple's sort of doing Game Center like that, but
Apple Arcade.
Apple Arcade. But if you look at, like Xbox has a game service too now. So where you could play all these games. Can you imagine if Apple did that with the the Mac App Store that says, pay this, it all goes, to the, developers who participate. I think it would. I think it would go. I don't know why other companies.
Well, they used to do something very similar to that with their own applications, where it was all kind of bundled together, and then that just fell apart.
The iLife CD is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. It did, of course, it didn't include. It didn't include Logic, and it didn't include Final Cut Pro, but it had everything else that Apple was offering at the time for a decent price.
GarageBand.
Yeah, I just remember when we were installing Snow Leopard, we had to find the second disc, and sometimes you didn't have that second disc. You all remember that? Come on.
Oh, good times. Good times.
One question, I honestly don't know, and I'm not going to mess with this computer. I'm having enough connectivity issues. Are there any games in SetApp?
No.
I don't think so.
I didn't think so. And that, of course, I'm not a gamer, so that's good. But I think, Warren, that might be where it might be a challenge for Apple to try to do this because, the one thing you can say about the SetApp situation is that it is extremely well curated. They don't just slap things in there because somebody says, "Yeah, I'd like to sign up." You look there; they are a really high quality set of utilities and programs, and I think that's why it works. Because
Apple could do the same thing with their app.
Sure,
you do it with the game, like I said.
To a point,
Arcade. So they got quality developers to I'm not a gamer either, so I can't tell you what's in there. But from SetApp, they have things that I've heard of before SetApp, in their package.
Yeah.
So, but Apple could say, more people would join the Mac App Store, right? If they did this, and Apple could say, "Listen, we're going to do a subscription service, just like like we do with everything else, and we're going to say for $50 a month, you could have access to these key apps in the Mac App Store," and then do what SetApp does and say, if you don't subscribe anymore, the little linky that you click doesn't work anymore, and says you have to open up SetApp to do it.
$50 a month is a lot more than SetApp is.
Well, that would be like a pro app subscription, I would assume.
Yeah, right. Like Apple could say for $50 you get Logic and.
But for basically in under a year, you could buy both of those programs for life than less than $50 a month.
Well, let's say that it partnered with Adobe. Let's say that Apple partnered with Adobe. Yeah. And for that $50 a month.
I can't see Apple.
That's not going to happen.
Or Microsoft.
I can't see Adobe partnering with Apple.
Don't crush my dream.
One at a time, guys. One at a time.
Yeah. I'm not saying Adobe or Microsoft, but it could be, some of the big developers that you guys talk about and like in that, like I'm sure what's the note the text thing that Dave Hamilton loves, that could be Text Expander, is that the one?
Yeah,
Text Expander.
So all this stuff that all these kind of not indie and not Microsoft, somewhere in between, get together and say, listen, I'm in, and then they get a cut.
So I'm going to vote for Apple not Sherlocking the Ukrainian developers.
Well,
Yeah.
Me too. I'm just surprised that nobody has. It's a good model. I'm just surprised that it hasn't.
Well, we don't know how much money MacPaw makes off of it.
Right.
But there's one other thing too,
and it doesn't have to step on our toes either.
Warren, I forget exactly.
Software. Sorry.
Yeah, Warren, I forget exactly what phrase you used or what term you used, but for Apple to pick certain apps to highlight and make part of that separate deal, I mean, they get enough garbage now about they charge too much, or they're squeezing out other developers, or they're not being fair to people, and all that. My God, this would just be fodder for the cannon for that whole thing. The best thing they can do is stay away from it and just let people buy the apps the way they are now.
But those medium-sized developers will get a steady revenue stream, just like they would. That's why they go to SetApp, because they could,
And that's the thing that everybody skips over when we talk about subscriptions in general, which is not what we started out talking about. But that's right. That's what people like about it is, it's TextExpander went subscription so that there would be, sort of a less fluctuating amount of income and
a steady revenue stream.
Yeah. And, I've never known a developer and Jim is among them. I've never known a developer that no matter how nicely you ask them and how sweetly you say it and how much you bat your eyelashes, developers don't want to work for free.
Right. So in that, think of Apple News, because that's exactly what we're talking about. Basically, Apple News was their model was to partner with newspapers and say, we're going to give you a cut of this. Let's, if you want to come in. And a lot at first didn't come in because they had to weigh my subscription versus, Apple's, rent money coming back to me. So, but for the most part, they did it. So there's no reason why Apple wouldn't do that again, just instead of a newspapers, do it with developers.
Well, one thing's for sure, we're not going to affect what Apple does or doesn't do. So,
what tonight?
And that has ever stopped us?
Maybe tomorrow.
Well,
I quit.
Good point. Guys, it's fascinating. We started a topic. I think it'll take 5 minutes, and we do a good solid 30 on it. One other thing I wanted to do, and I'm going to modify what I suggested earlier. I'm going to ask everybody to go around the table and pick one non-tech podcast that you enjoy. We may do some other rounds later, but for right now, we have enough people here. I want to pick one because I think, we all enjoy a lot of great tech podcasts. Some of us produce some of those great tech podcasts, and others are guests on those great tech podcasts. But there are a lot of other podcasts out there. I'd like to know something that each of you enjoy that is not tech. And it doesn't have to be Apple related. I don't really care what it is, but something that you would be comfortable recommending to someone that if they say, hey, I'm interested in this, you could say, here, I've got a podcast for you. So I'm going to take the screen order just as I did before and start with Guy. Guy, do you have any non-tech podcasts that you listen to?
Oh, boy, most of the ones I listen to are tech podcasts, but there's one that I kind of go back and forth with depending on what he talks about is The Way I Heard It with Mike Rowe. This is the same guy that did a show called Dirty Jobs back in the early aughts. And I don't always really care for his politics, but he gets some really good guests on every once in a while. And I can usually tell within about 5 to 10 minutes whether I'm going to be interested in listening to the whole show. But it's I 9 times out of 10 I usually enjoy it. And another one, I was going to say, but that's a tech podcast. Never mind.
Okay, good. David, how about you? Do you absorb anything other than tech?
Easy for you to say.
I think that was actually kind of difficult for him to say.
It was easy for him to say. It was hard for us to hear.
He's froze. I honestly have. I'm just looking in my podcast feeds. I always like Johnny Carson. There's a podcast called the Carson Podcast.
The Carson Podcast is so good.
Yeah, and he has every week he has different people that have been, behind the scenes. And I know he's also talked to Tom Dreesen a bunch of times, since who appeared on Carson so many times, and even had Joan Van Ark on one, who was from the San Diego Zoo, and so it's kind of neat to listen to that, and that's something that's not tech that's in my feed. And I grab that podcast from time to time, listen to it.
That's a great choice, David. Yeah, and maybe it just shows our age, but there's just, there are a few people that are timeless, and Carson is definitely one. So good choice. Good choice.
Yeah.
Jeff Butts,
I think the closest for me isn't technically a podcast, but it's a YouTube channel, VASaviation. And I'm kind of an aviation buff, and they do a bunch of, they get recordings of air traffic control communications and plot those on a moving radar map. And, some of them are funny, some of them are scary. Some of them will just set you off, and you're like, why did they let him get away with that? So
wow.
that's my non-tech guilty pleasure.
Okay, that's interesting. Was not familiar with that, and I'm going to have to go and look that up.
You watch Blankolirio?
Okay, good.
Not familiar with that one, Jim.
That's another YouTube channel. That's aviation. I think he uses VAS stuff in some of his.
Okay.
He analyzes, crashes and stuff like that.
DM me the name. I'll look it up. There's that one, and there's 7.4 Gear, which is all 747 stuff.
Okay, interesting. Warren, when your wife is not home, what do you listen to?
Chicka boom, chick now. When I had to think about this too, because mostly tech podcasts, obviously. But I do like the Apple News in the morning. It's actually the one podcast they once said they were doing, and it's I think it's just Apple News something with
that's actually not bad.
Shamitha Basu and Gerard somebody. I'm impressed that I got that far. Yeah, so it's basically just kind of like a news brief, which is nice. Years ago, I used to do the same thing with the A lady, and she used to give me my news. Now it's basically the same thing. And then the only other one I did was it was called Zach to the Future, and I don't know how I heard about it, but it was basically a podcast with MacPaw Gosler from Saved by the Bell, and he was joined by he was joined by one of the writers of the current show, who's a big buff of Saved by the Bell. Anyways, they got together, and for like 5 seasons, they would start with the beginning episode, the first episode of Saved by the Bell, and they go through each season and analyze it at the end. They wouldn't like play the whole thing, but they kind of analyze what was going on. And I forgot that I really liked that show, and I really liked Tiffany and Deason a lot, and like we all do. And it was funny, and he's funny. And then it got weird because about a year ago, the show that he was in, MacPaw Gosler, got canceled. It was a mixed-ish, and they didn't really talk about it on the podcast, and it just stopped. Like we were like, we're gonna go on. They were like mid-season stopped, and I tried to find out why, and it's a mystery. So I don't know if maybe they got in trouble for something, or I don't know. But yeah, good show. And maybe watch the reboot, which wasn't as good as the old one. So
I should have done this earlier. I'm going to ask everybody to throw links to these podcasts, because I want to make sure I get them right in the show notes. So if you can find links to the YouTube channel or whatever, please throw them in the Zoom chat so that I have them archived. Jeff, how about you? I know you have off-the-wall tastes on lots of things.
Can I give you 2?
Sure.
Please. Okay.
Sure.
First one is Invisibilia. And it's an NPR podcast about science, but it's done through storytelling, and it is fracking fascinating every single episode. And you're just drawn in. Absolutely wonderful. So Invisibilia. And then the other one is My Favorite Murder. And see, I already got the head nods. So for the very few of you that don't know, it's a show that Karen Gilgraff and Georgia Hardstark do. And each episode, they show up, they have picked a murder case. The other person doesn't know what the case is. And then they tell each other about this murder case. And they're both comedians, so you get a lot of humor in it. But it can also get like really serious, and they go into just all of these fascinating murders from through time. So, like they talked about the royal family murders during the Russian Revolution. And they've done stuff on is it the Golden State Murderer? Yes, which was absolutely fascinating. So a lot of big name cases, and some that are less known but are also incredibly fascinating. So just loads of fun.
Okay, that's interesting. I never pictured you as a true crime guy, Jeff.
I'm not, but I'm a My Favorite Murder person. I am definitely a murderino.
I know I didn't trust you.
Don't know what that means, but okay.
It means you're a fan of My Favorite Murder.
Stay away from Jeff.
Yeah.
I'm someone that appreciates
not Jeff Buckley.
Stay out of the woods.
Yeah.
And stay sexy and don't get murdered.
Sound advice.
Our non-tech podcast picks continue in the next edition of MacVoices as we finish up this MacVoices live discussion. I'm sure there'll be something there that you haven't heard of that you will enjoy. Until the next time, and as always, I'm Chuck Joyner. Thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you MacVoices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.